Yeah, first we'll start with the easy part, the rear suspension. I put on a new set of Skyjacker 6-inch lift springs onto the existing shackle bracket, which is up there. There's the shackle. And the existing front bracket is up there. And then for an additional 3 or 4 inches of height, rather than using a spacer, I use the existing springs, which are these, and they came with this spacer block, which I had to modify by drilling a hole in the middle to let the top stub fit down in it. And I cut off the end of this existing spring here because it was hitting the bracket here. And that makes it a very stable, less axle wrap by having a second set of springs, and of course makes it able to handle heavier loads. And then in the front of that, I made my own couple of 1/4-inch steel bars on either side of the springs to bolt them together to keep from moving independently left, right. And then I also add an additional pipe to the sway bar to extend it. And then these are the new shocks, Bilstein monotube nitrogen filled shocks. These happen to be the longest ones they make. And I think these are 14-inch U-bolts here. And then this is the original Sterling axle. This one has posi traction on it. So I left that alone. And in order to gain more space for the wheel wells, I did modify the exhaust. I cut it off right after the muffler, added these 2 flexible extensions to the exhaust so that the exhaust comes out further back on the truck. And that will allow me to cut out the wheel wells a few inches and put in monster size tires. These are the standard tires it comes with, 31 inches. See, it's got a lot of space there. There's the bars that I cut to keep the springs, the 2 sets of springs, stabilized. And the sway bar extension pipe. Another little more difficult was this transfer case here. I originally hung it from chains just to hold it in place. I actually made a custom wooden stand that I could jack up and then put the chains on it. The chains go around a cross member up there, and after cutting off one of the tabs on top, I was able to get a protrusion out over the top of this transfer case to fit into that channel in the crossbeam. That makes it much more stable. The other side, I fabricated a piece of angle iron and chains to hold the wing that sticks down for the front drive shaft. It's held in place very securely with the angle iron that is bolted to the top crossbeam. The angle iron keeps it from, and it's notched out at the bottom to fit in to a notch very securely so the transfer case won't go up, and the chains keep the transfer case from going down forward backward, because there's actually two chains, or there's a chain all the way around the crossbeam. And then this front part here has a custom made bracket on it to bolt it to the crossbeam. And I made sure that the tilt angle from front to back was approximately 6 degrees, about the same as the original drivetrain was tilted, and trying to match the up tilt of the differential here, which is tilted up about 6 degrees. And this drive shaft here will go between those two pieces here. This front piece here I cobbled together from, I used a part that's actually, I believe that yoke is designed to go on the front, this part of the transfer case, the front drive shaft yoke. And that's actually the same yoke as this. And then I also found a shaft, spline shaft, that I believe also goes over here, that happens to fit in the front here as well. And those are just going to be floating, because this is going to be bolted to the frame via this crossbeam, and the transmission is also bolted to the frame via this crossbeam. So these two parts are fixed, and I have a small drive shaft to fit in between those two parts. In other words, it's a divorced transfer case with a drive shaft in between the transmission. Normally they come with a transfer case bolted to the transmission, and without this tailpiece, this cone-shaped tailpiece only comes on two-wheel drive models. Four-wheel drive models, they replace the cone-shaped tailpiece with a transfer case that's bolted onto the transmission. But in order to replace that, you have to rebuild the transmission to replace the shaft inside the transmission, because it's extra long to go all the way through that cone. I didn't want to rebuild the transmission, so I decided I would simply divorce the transfer case like this, that left me with a very long distance to the front drive shaft. And the front, it was so long that I had to find a special place to custom build that drive shaft, which is right here. It has a double cardan CV joint on this end here, and a slip joint on this end here. Front differential, and it is 78.5 inches long. But I only use it off-road, low RPM, so I don't have to worry about the critical speed. I've done the calculation, and it's well within the safe parameters. Then comes the hardest part, which is the front suspension. At first I made these brackets using the existing radius arm bracket to make the spring mount. But then I decided that that was too thick for these big tires. The tire would end up hitting this. So on the other side I put in a different kind of bracket. I'm going to replace this one too. These are 6-inch lift, super lift springs, which I have moved forward 4 inches from stock. This axle is 4 inches further forward. 4 inches forward from stock. And that meant I had to put in an extension for this Bilstein shock, which is also a monotube nitrogen shock with an extension, because I moved the axle forward. And I also had to rebuild this mounting bracket. The first one, I didn't have that big 1/4-inch steel angle iron that's 2 inches wide, and it wasn't strong enough, so I added that angle iron. And that whole bracket there supports one end of the steering hydraulic cylinder, which is right there. I've also made another bracket that is kind of weakly supporting it from moving left, right, or in this case forward and backwards. That's just helping it stabilize it, that bracket. This is the main bracket that holds it from moving left, right. And that upper cylinder is attached to the pitman arm, which I'll show you. In a minute I'll give you a better view of the pitman arm. It drives 2 hoses that are attached to this lower cylinder, which I've bolted to the axle on one end, and bolted to the tie rod on the other end. And of course I had to beef this up too, just because you need to be able to endure a lot of pressure on these steerings. So this has got a combination of the steering bracket here is a combination of 1/4-inch thick 2-inch angle iron, and also some 1.5-inch by 3/16-inch angle iron, and a couple of U-bolts in order to, as well as an extra little U-bolt to keep it from moving that way. And then this little bump out keeps it from moving this other way. So that makes that pretty strong. And I've added a backup steel cable system in case the hydraulic lines break. I'll still have mechanical steering using these cables on pulleys. The geometry of that is a little complicated. I won't get into it now. And of course I've got a 13,000-pound winch mounted upside down right here, and some pipe bumpers, lights. There's a pitman arm with two of the cables attached to the pitman arm, and also you could see the silver rod coming out of the hydraulic cylinder, the driving cylinder, the master cylinder, and then there's the slave cylinder down there. And this Dana 60 here, I bought used. This was a 2-wheel drive. I removed the front axle and put in this Dana 60. Which is a lot of work. Oh, and here's the front shackles for those springs. These actually are 3/8-inch thick shackle plates. And I used another shackle that I just bolted to the front of the frame with some grade 8 bolts and some reinforcement to make these, makes it a nice jack up point. I can jack it up with these two jacks. Jack up the whole front end with these two high lift jacks. They're actually Smitty belts. Highly recommend the Smitty belts over the high lifts. There's those shackles and the brackets. And here we have the new bracket I put for the back of the spring mount. I'm using an angle iron, 2-inch wide angle iron with 1/4-inch thick steel to support the outside of the bracket, and the inside of that bracket is a 3/4-inch bolt bolted through the existing radius arm bracket. So that should be pretty stable there. And I had to cut down these uni-strut reinforced elbows to hold this piece of angle iron back here. And then here's another piece of angle iron for the steering cables. Hold, and there's the pitman arm there. And yes, this front end was a lot of work. A lot of work went into this front end. This extra cable here is to support the winch. It's attached to the frame, and it goes up here and it wraps around the winch. Keep the winch from pulling loose. And then the only other thing I didn't show you was inside this, the end of this frame, I added another piece of reinforced uni-strut elbow to make it extra strong. So shouldn't have any problems there. That's about it.
Okay, inaugural drive. Tires turning. Here it comes. It lives! It's alive! Reverse works. Where's he going?